What's up, winners? I'm Sylvia Chagla, and over a decade or even longer, I have been obsessed with everything around people, around how to develop, how to turn ideas into reality, and this is all based on change and transformation, especially in this digital world. I have been learning, studying, and applying. I was one of the youngest HR consultants for an executive and was leading change projects within the biggest telecommunication merger in Europe. And I am today combining and blending Eastern and Western knowledge in order to help you to change the way the world works so we can all have more efficiency, productivity, and engagement and actually transform and change successfully. I have been doing this for ages and ages by myself, from almost homeless into a successful corporate high flyer, and today I'm excited and passionate entrepreneur supporting leaders and entrepreneurs like you within startups, SMEs, and Fortune 500 companies to create and make the difference they actually crave for. So don't expect any conventional HR and kind of those topics around this, but of course everything what is combined from street smart and book smart and many other things here on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am excited to go with you on this journey and winx today. Hello, and welcome. Yes, I'm so super excited to have here Alex with me. Alex is a dear friend of mine and, of course, a badass entrepreneur and business leader. And I'm super excited to have him here today. He is super busy. And the two of us ended by accident right now in Berlin, but we are in two different locations. So before we will dive into the topic, Alex, would you be so kind and introduce yourself briefly to those who don't know you?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here. It's a real honor. It's so much fun always to talk with you. We've had so many encounters in, I don't even know, we need to count how many countries we've been in together, doing crazy stuff, trips, whatever. And it's always your energy, the questions you ask. I'm excited, and I'm excited for this call. About myself, long journey of, I guess it started, I have a few starting points for conversations like this. I had a pretty troubled childhood, and coming out, I feel, has really put me in a position of, or in a skill set of dealing more with what you require as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, and as a person that needs to navigate in today's world that is not structured, easy to predict anymore. So in a way, some of the past experiences that weren't so nice led me right into a capability that helped me navigate today's uncertain times. And what better time it is to have this conversation right now, where all over the world there's a lot going on, not only pleasant stuff, and we need to cope with it. And so it started with that kind of experience, with a like some trauma, some non-optimal experience in my childhood, in my teens. And then I thought I'd take a standard career and I go into corporate, and I experienced some of my corporate, I guess, episodes led me to realize that my rebel nature doesn't fit so well, or at least I wanted to, I guess, optimize some of the things too radically. And I reoriented, and I dove into the startup world. I helped with some startups. I launched some myself. Some of them were successful, some of them weren't. And at some point I decided, after some requests, to bridge between startups and corporates and teach business leaders in this time, in these uncertain times, what they require to thrive in this economy. That is not like the past economy, like the industrial age economy, very predictable, very plannable, resource-based. Instead, to navigate with a skill I call adaptability intelligence. And by that, have kind of like a master skill to make better decisions and to innovate better. And by that, to build stronger businesses. That's my main occupation. I do some coaching. I travel a lot. And that's a little bit about myself, background. You know, these things can be long or short, but just so you get an idea.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yes, so I think we have lots of things in common, and therefore we might end up over and over with each other in different countries and on different continents, in fact. So I would like to start and dive into the topic. You've just mentioned it, and before we will go into the adaptable intelligence, I would like to discuss the first thing, what I shared also in the bio about you being digital native. For everybody who is basically just thinking, okay, yes, we have all the generations, the Y, Z, and millennials, etc. But what would you say is a digital native, and how does it pay into the topic of, yeah, basically face this uncertain time and the digital development that is right now skyrocketing completely from my point of view?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, every younger generation is by nature more open, often more radical, challenges the status quo. So it's not in the millennial generation, in the digital generation, it is not the age per se that makes us, that makes them, whatever perspective you look from, different. It's also not something that makes us or them more skilled. What I believe is this: certain things come more natural, certain interaction with technology come more natural if you've done it all along, if you've done it from a young age. So that's digital native in its purest form. We just happened to be born into an age where analog is no longer the default methodology of how the world works, but digital is. And so the speediness of it all and the compilation of different complexities comes more natural. So we, from an early age, had to respond to it and therefore build more capability than people that were born earlier, were first trained and educated and experienced the world as analog, and then suddenly everything shifted. It's simply a capability standpoint. And at the same time, a lot of people in older ages can decide to become, it's a learnable skill, can decide to become basically digital native. They can become millennial, if you want to say it like that. Not because they are by default the definition ready type, but because their mindset is more ready and open than some mindsets that are much younger, but follow more the old traditional industrial age thinking, right? Mm-hmm. The main point that I want to make here is actually learnability is the main aspect, and the readiness and the willingness to learn and to keep being curious and to change your mindsets around things is the number one skill that we need in this economy, in this age, moving forward. There's no more important skill, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So this pays basically in the topic of the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, where you literally look at things, you see that things are changing, and therefore you're curious to adapt new things. And this leads me straight away to the next topic about, just to clarify a few things that we understand and that we are all on the same page, is what do you mean, and I just want to make sure that I say it correctly, adaptive intelligence. Would you mind to share with us your phrase or how you define this kind of combination when it comes to the context of this current business and this current economic development around the world?
Yeah, amazing question. Also, it excites me, as you can probably see. What a fundamental thing we need to understand and acknowledge before I answer the question is that a beautiful thing about humans is that our brain is adaptable. We have neuroplasticity built into our operating system and into our hardware. And this is, imagine a computer that builds more capacity as it needs, right? And not only physical capacity for data, but also performance. and it erases and it builds new depending on what requirements approach. This is our brain. So what I want to say is, by default, we are machines that are made to adapt. We aren't people that are made to have a fixed mindset. However, evolution, from an evolutionary standpoint, our brain has understood that if we can keep some form of fixed continuity, we're going to conserve energy. And conserving energy is what every organism is trying to do, because to acquire energy, to get energy, is costly. It costs energy, and it costs, exposing yourself to danger, et cetera, et cetera. And if you understand this dynamic between those two capabilities or those two states, it's much easier to then wrap your head around what we can do with it, right? And here we go. So this is the fundamental thing I wanted to kind of establish. In our present day, a lot of mindsets and the economy as a whole is still operating primarily on a industrial age thinking. And the industrial age thinking, including leadership, including education, and including the framework of how much can shift and change, is based entirely around the idea of IQ, of intelligence, of the intelligence quotient, right? That was developed early in the 20th century. And it basically, the more you have, the better you are, right? The more intelligence IQ you have, the smarter you are, the more ready you are for the workforce, for the challenge, for whatever. The issue with that is it's a phenomenal quotient. It's a phenomenal measuring tool for comparing different people. And it's fairly dynamic too. It is not fixed by default, because it's always a comparison. Your IQ is always compared to your age group as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. So you have a higher IQ compared to your age group, means if you have a higher IQ, then that means, let's say, than 100, that means that you have a higher IQ than your average age group. So it is a dynamic tool. The problem with it is we have a lot of people that go very religiously by that and build their entire lives around it. And the problem is, if you get fixed on that, and IQ is the only measuring tool for capability, and then something externally changes, and you've worked all your life to be an expert at this skill or this trajectory, and something throws you off that path or disrupts this trajectory that you have, you suddenly have zero skills. Yeah. And that's the big problem that we're facing in the economy, and a lot of leaders are facing these days, because we're so fixed and we're so expert in what we do, but we're usually not experts outside of that. And you can imagine it like the spectrum of light. The spectrum of light waves goes from very short waves. Those are like gamma waves, Röntgen waves that they use in medicine, all the way up to television waves that are very long. So information gets transmitted on either short waves or in long waves and anything in between. And it's a huge spectrum. And the human eye, the part that our eye senses are receiving, it's a very, very small band on that spectrum. So the light we see, the capability of speaking, seeing this microphone and speaking into it, the capability to see you, is the spectrum on the entire spectrum of light waves that is visible light. So this very tiny band, it's not very large, is everything we see with our sense organs in terms of visibility. And in the same way, I want to make an analogy of what IQ is. IQ is only a part of the spectrum of our range of capabilities in order to navigate the world. But we've religiously put everything around that small band in the same way that we believe in everyday life that everything we see is everything. When the truth is, if we put on night vision infrared goggles, we see more because we suddenly see at night, right? And where it was dark, we suddenly see more. So we enlarge our spectrum. Or if we use gamma rays, we can look into other spectrums of the experience, which our eye sense organs cannot. And suddenly reality extends. So if we think about it hard, and if we know biology, We know there's more than what we can see, but we don't appreciate that on an everyday basis. And that's a huge trap. And so to summarize, or to kind of bring it back to your question, AQ is just another strip on that spectrum. It allows you to deal with problems that are outside of this narrow, day-to-day, fixed trajectory. And it allows you to gain more capabilities, especially those capabilities you need in times where things aren't going the way you anticipated. So you made a 5-year plan, and then after 2 years, a lot changes, and you suddenly have to come up with new solutions, new decisions. Adaptability, intelligence helps you do that, where intelligence helps you to make better decisions in a planned trajectory where you're an expert. Does that bring it back to your question?
Yes, absolutely. So I love the example, and I talk about it like, you know, you have a software in your brain. You can literally exchange the hardware. You can literally do that. So you can level up everything what you have in your brain, and you can also run some updates. And this is what you're just sharing as well. Basically run some updates for your software in your brain. So I would love to go with you now a little bit deeper. So on a high level, it's basically one layer more, or maybe basically a different aspect, or basically invitation of take another perspective about how we approach things. So IQ, of course, one part, very old, very established, and like you've just mentioned, sometimes even blocking us to see things differently that require any kind of new ways of being approached, especially when it comes now to what we have at the moment. I think this is the best example of the global pandemic. Nobody has been in a global pandemic as far as I know. Well, I guess nobody experienced it that way, right? So we all have now to adapt in so many different levels that it is for some people maybe now easier to grasp. But I would like to go even deeper. So what does adaptive intelligence basically incorporate, or is basically based on, in order to now, and this is where we want to go to, be able to adapt within this digital future?
Amazing. I love the example as well. And the beauty is, you know, this crisis shows that we can adapt. You know, when people said in the past, you know, but it doesn't work here, or it doesn't work that way, or you can't do that. And then, you know, this extreme case of a crisis or a change situation comes along, you see they can, because now suddenly they have to.
Yeah, just like that.
And it just proves that we can adapt. It's never about can we, it's always about do we want to, right? Do we see it as important enough? Is it priority enough? And now it has, without our consent, been made priority enough, right? The external circumstance put so much pressure on, for example, businesses that need to reroute to digital, for example, where physical used to be their main revenue source, that now there's no choice. But as long as you still have choice, you can always put your thoughts in and say, nah, I don't think that's going to work, right? And that's when it gets really exciting, because this is what you're actually asking. How do we, in times where that pressure isn't on, how do we, in a natural state of moving along the timeline, let's say, how do we, despite having less pressure or not a lethal pressure, how do we choose to and bring up the resources to change deliberately, right? And adapt. Mm-hmm. And I feel there's a number of, or I want to approach it from a neuroscientific standpoint. And I want to show what I have learned myself from experts in the field about how we can change our thoughts, change the way we look at change as a intruder, as an attacker, and then change those thoughts and replace them with better thoughts. It's a 5-step process, and it's actually fairly simple.
I love processes.
I was gonna say you love
you love process. Like, I do. So please share it with us. The
interesting thing is, if people don't have to, they barely ever will, right? And if if you see what happens when people are confronted with a situation they didn't anticipate and that damages them or hurts them, or if they feel attacked, what they usually do is they do one or two things. They either do more of the same or they do less of the same, but they don't change perspective, change the plan, and try out something new. More of the same means overreacting, often with anger, often with blame or shame. And this is what you see leaders do, and that's when it gets really damaging. And I work with big corporations. There's some wonderful brands that the world over, they are known. And I know of people that work there and that report that their manager is violent, has very little understanding of navigating the current situation. I'm not even talking about this situation, any current situation that isn't following the trajectory. And then the question really becomes, are they supposed to be a leader? And we have a whole nother conversation about how do you promote leaders, right? So that's overreaction.
I just was talking about exactly this topic, about being good in one topic and be a leader, and having leadership skills is a completely different story. But yes, I think this is another whole new podcast, Alex.
Right. And there's an interesting book. It's called The Peter Principle. Maybe you know it. I recommend it. It's a fun read, and it really doubles down on that point. But so if we take aside overreaction or doing more of the same, which clearly isn't working anymore because the world has moved on, reality has moved on, but the old trajectory, they just try to hold on to their old ways and it doesn't work, right? Overreaction. The alternative is paralysis, right? Freezing, not knowing what to do, again, not being a leader. Leaders are leaders because they can lead into the future. That's the whole point, right? And that's why it becomes so important in times where change is the norm, where change is the only thing that's the constant. That's why we need leaders that have the capability that when an intrusion, when an irritation comes, they go, okay, what options do I have? Let's try out this, let's try out that. But they stay in an option-oriented mindset, right? There's enough businesses that have failed. There's enough businesses right now that are under scrutiny where people say, look, you've not done your homework and now you're paying the price, right? Laying off a lot of people, laying off leaders and on a large scale. And in a way, hurting the economy simply because of the failure to anticipate change or to deal with change, right? So again, this is establishing the context. And so why don't we do more of that? When we know that this is the solution to dealing with this situation, with this economy, with this fast-moving global space that we're trying to optimize and do business in and thrive in, why don't we do more of? Why don't we develop more capability to change? Why don't we include this into our leadership development programs? Why don't we include this into education, children's education? Fundamentally, why is algebra more important than this? That's my question. And the answer, one of the answers is, and now we're going back from school to adult life, it's difficult. It is very difficult to do that work because it's internal work. It isn't, oh, that guy didn't do his job, or that outside circumstance, I just couldn't see it. No, it's if other people can see it, and if other people can see it, then you can develop the capabilities to see it too. So it's full responsibility, right? The other reason why we don't do more of it is it's simply unsexy, right? It's always nice to build a, right? You can build shiny, cool projects that look amazing and boost your brand image. Those are sexy, and those are usually facades of the real issues. But working on yourself, nobody sees all the work that you put in. Nobody sees what it takes for an actual good leader to become an amazing leader. It takes sweat and tears and long work and confusion and struggle and resistance from the outside. It takes so much, right? So that's why we don't do much of it. And to bring this point home, I guess the very first step of those 5 steps really is representative of that. It's not sexy. And that is the first one, the first fundamental point on the road to achieving and acquiring adaptability intelligence is self-examination. And self-examination knowing yourself is not a very attractive thing. You know, a lot of leaders, especially business leaders, they frown upon it. You know, journaling, who cares? You know, it's what a pussy, you know, what a weak person, right? And there's a lot of, this is still going on in the business world a lot. This, you know, a strong leader has to do this or that and has to, you know, a strong leader doesn't have to think or doesn't have to reflect. No, that's the fundament. You need to know who you want to be and who you don't want to be in the situation when it gets tough. And you need to know that before, because you don't have the time when it gets really tough to think, because that's when the emotions come up. And that's why I'm digging a lot into neuroscience, because really what it comes down to is something that neuroscientists call your distress tolerance. It's basically the threshold that you're capable of withstanding irritation. You know, when you're worried, when you're confused of stress for outside stressors, when you have to face uncertainty and you're responsible for making a decision, but you simply don't know what decision to make because it's a new scenario, that's when you get out of your comfort zone and things start getting really tough. And that's why we have leaders. That is the responsibility of leaders, right? Mm-hmm. And without self-examination, you don't know who to be in that moment and what values to base your reactions on. And that's why we have these leaders that we mentioned a minute ago, that get violent and aggressive and blame other people. So self-examination is the first step. Without that as a foundation, we have more fluctuation in the emotional state of a person that's facing change. Mm-hmm. Simple as that. You can prove that neuroscientifically. And so if we assume that as a foundational point that we can achieve, it really comes down to investing the time to build yourself to do that. Right? So that's the first point. The second one, let's go through it fairly quickly, because I want to make sure that I'm not just, theorizing here and throwing a lot of theory at you, but make sure when you hear this, all of the people listening, make sure that you think about your context and where you're guilty of this, and we're all guilty of this in your own life. The second one is when change has hit, let's say something has, hit you that you didn't expect, you have your process and you didn't expect it, and it's already here. You're beyond the stage where you can be like, oh, what would I do? Who would I be when it gets tough? No, it's already here. How do you get out of it? How do you change your emotional state? You're affected right now. You're stressed, you're sweating, you're anxious. How do you get out of this? Right? Because you make better decisions, scientifically proven. You make better decisions in a calmer state. So the logical thing to do is to get out of it as quickly as possible. Now, most people are not able to do that. Most people are not able to tell themselves, I'm observing myself. I'm right now being stressed. I'm not being the nicest boss. I'm not being the nicest partner. The question is, how can you? And state change is something that fascinates me a lot. State change has to do a lot with anchoring and with understanding neuroscience and with observing what state you are in and then choosing different thoughts. So for example, what I do, I have morning questions. Every morning I write down the answers to 3 questions and I anchor a feeling. So for example, I'd say to myself this morning, today I want to feel alive. I want to feel alive. What does alive? You can feel alive or you can feel enthusiastic, right? So you have a reference point. And I say that to have an anchor. And then throughout the day, without question, most of the days, without question, some external thing will disrupt my mood, right? Maybe there's a loud noise. Maybe there's a person that has draining energy. Maybe there's an offender. Maybe there's all kinds of things. And they will inevitably pull down my energy, right? And maybe I'm guilty of that too for other people. But the point is, I have my anchor. And if I know how to get back to my anchor, I have an easier way to get back to where I want to be compared to the energy that somebody or some situation dragged me into, right? And I know of myself, and I'm pretty sure everybody listening can relate to this, can remember a situation where they kept circling in that negative feeling that some external circumstance caused them and they couldn't get out of it. but in order to make better decision, in order to be capable of adapting and not being stuck in your response, reactiveness, you need to have the capability of state change, right? So now we've learned about number 2. So self-examination, state change. Third, one factor of this crazy world being so, putting so much pressure on us, we all want to be in an effortless state. All of us want to experience a day of flow where everything goes the way we want it, and we learn and we grow and we make money and, all of these things. Of course, you can probably even think of a person that seemingly has that every day. All of you, I have no doubt, can think of a person that navigates life and it always looks like they're, it's just all going easy and it's flowing, right? And to me, I have one specifically in mind. And I mention this person a lot, Bruce Lee. I love this guy. So he's a big role model. And one of the reasons is not the fact that everywhere he was filmed and on stage and presented to the public, he was in that state, but because I was curious why. And the reason why is exactly what I'm trying to teach here, what I'm trying to share here, which is if you see pictures of this guy, feel free to Google Bruce Lee and image search. And you always see these pictures of him kind of just ready to fight somebody. And you look him in the eye and it's this almost like enthusiasm, this, come on, bring it on, almost joy of what's next. And this is a fundamental thing that I want to point out is there's a difference between what IQ can do, which is preparing because you have a ton of resources, whether it's a ton of money or a ton of experience, or the ability to be ready whatever comes your way, to be less distressed, to increase your distress tolerance, that's the neuroscientific term, to many things coming your way. And that's AQ. And that's something Bruce Lee can do. And that's what a lot of people that seemingly navigate the world effortlessly do. Keep an eye out for that. I encourage you. But back to the point number 3 on the list. One reason why that gets difficult is because there's just an overload of information. And therefore an overload of us having to deal with that information and trying to still make life productive, enjoyable, etc. Right? And there's a study that was made between 1985 and 2011. There was a 3-fold increase, 300% increase in the information our brain processes on a daily basis. So there's scientific proof again of the degree of what our brains have to deal with these days and make decisions on compared to 1985. So how do we go about it? How do we make sure we're still operating on a high performance level and on a joyful level, let's not forget about it, despite the fact that information overload has increased? Well, the simple answer is, it almost sounds too simple, simplify things. And so my third recommendation is macro decisions. A lot of leaders that, let's say, create a suboptimal experience, they are micromanagers, right? So they're trying to stay on top of and control every micro decision. I'm sure almost everybody here on this who's watching this has been, and I'm sure you have, Sylvie, been a follower of a leader that's a micromanager. We all know it doesn't work in a world where for every 1 email we get out of our inbox, 3 new ones come in. It doesn't work to micromanage. The only way to deal with it is to make smart rules to simplify our life. And by that to be more powerful because we have more mental capacity, more cognitive capacity. So think about in your life, what can you do to make macro decisions? One macro decision of mine is I don't have any meetings before 10. It's simple. Why? Because if I get a request to meet at 8:30, it's the simple answer, no, right? Because then otherwise, if I don't have that macro rule, what happens is on a Tuesday, somebody requests 8:30, on a Wednesday, somebody requests, 9, 10. I know that I can be a better performer at my job if I spent the first hours of the day on me, getting ready to my best state, and then starting performance, right? Performing, delivering. right? So the first hours of my day are for me, and then I get into my meetings after 10 in optimal state. If I jeopardize this, I'm not going to be as good as I could. Therefore, I have a macro rule, because otherwise I'd be stuck in micro decisions for every day or every week to try to say yes or no, depending on how I feel on that given day. And instead, I just say simple.
Mhm.
After 10, go ahead, book something in my calendar, no problem. Before that, no. Another one, just to give you another example, to start thinking about your own context, is one that I got gifted, one macro decision that I got gifted by my friend Skip, is no decision before movement. So again, neuroscience says, or gives us this proof that we're better decision makers if we have exercised.
Yes.
Why would I not take advantage of this if I'm trying to be, a good business leader, a good decision maker, etc.? Simple macro rule. I will not make a decision before I work out. Simple. So think about these in your own context. There's not enough time to go into this in more detail, but I want to finish the list and just give you two more hints here. The fourth one, once you've established that, let's say, staircase of going from 1 to 3, number 4 is mindful creative destruction. What I mean by that is, anybody who's done some theory of economics knows of creative destruction and how to build something new, you have to destroy something old, right? Or you could say, on a volcanic ground, come up new plants, just kind of, it's an accepted theory in the economy. So you have to tear something down to build something new. However, a lot of people go about this in a very radical way, and they offend people, and they go so hard that people build resistance. And then you can neither achieve your goal of moving along, developing, growing, and just building the future. Instead, you might even build more resistance, more walls are put up. It takes even longer to build the future. So that's why I put in this mindfulness aspect here. So you want to start asking yourself, what things can I change in my current way of navigating the world, of building my life, of relating to this person, to be better? But do it step by step. Do it with baby steps. Don't go from 0 exercise to like an hour and a half walk or run, right? How likely is it that you're gonna succeed with this? Start with a 5-minute run and then do 25 minutes walk, and then tomorrow you do a 10-minute run, and you build slowly. So be mindful of what will be sustainable, right? And in the work context, same thing. Think about your own context, but this is important. And then finally, we're getting to number 5 now. Finally, after building all of these as a foundation, that's when you get to what people often refer to when they say innovation management, which is no different than lateral thinking outside the box, creating new business models, so creating new trajectories, walking into the future with better systems, better products. They come after all of this other work, the unsexy work, that we've just built ourselves to now. And this is point number 5. Most leaders will see a disruption, and then they will build the facade by only supposedly doing lateral thinking, building something like a fancy innovation hub, or bringing in a new role in the company and being very proud of it. It's okay, but if you haven't done the 4 steps beforehand, there's a high likelihood that it won't be sustained, and that your reactions, your reactivity that's actually inside of you, because you might have not built adaptability, intelligence really from the ground up, it will come back up when times get tough. So that's what I wanted to share. It's a bit of a long one, but now you have the entire spectrum of what you need.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love them all. In fact, every one of them makes totally sense, and I think is absolutely applicable, like you said, and depending on where you are at the moment, how can you bring this into your own context? How can you apply it in order to start to make any kind of change or any kind of altering because many people are reacting with those resistance when you just use the word change, because this might cause, and I would invite everybody to pay attention towards how are you triggered when you are mindful about that, how words trigger you, because they are very powerful. So depending on how you feel about this or the other way, use yourself in a way that you can prime yourself. And I think this is what you've shared at the beginning. When you set a tone for the day, you basically prime yourself on the anchor. And I do it, by the way, every single day as well. I set my intention for the day. So exactly like, and this is so amazing to see. I invite everybody to try it out. It's so amazing to see when you prime, this is in your unconscious part of your brain, and you always kind of start to see and to think and to decide on to come back to exactly the state you want to be. So no matter what is going around you, you are basically kind of like the eye in the whole tornado, if that makes sense. And this is what I love about exactly this point, that no matter what is happening around, and right now lots and lots of things are happening, lots of things we have to face. And before we will wrap up, Alex, if you don't mind, one last question. So if someone is right now, let's say they have now all the 5 points, and someone wants to now get ready and adapt as a business leader for the digital future, what would be the number one, what you could share with someone to make sure that the whole workforce, that all the leaders and the people are kind of buy-in for those 5 steps?
Okay, very good question, because most people, the transition is the most important part, right? The theory, you know, if you've just taken some notes, the theory most people get, right? But how do you get started and then get the first traction with this, right? And I advise this, look, the most important point is the acknowledgement of the fact that the work starts here, right? So taking responsibility and saying a great leader doesn't try to find the change outside. They build the change. And that's how they build trust in the people around them, because these people see that they walk their talk. You know, anything visible comes from the person changing. And then these people see and they resonate with it and they build trust and they start following. And then it's the movement. Otherwise, it's very likely that you'll impose and that people cause resistance. And then it's not only slower, it's the exact opposite. And that's why a lot of people, companies have struggled, right? So it is the tough one. It is the essential one, the work that revolves around acknowledging that the work starts with you. So what I invite you to do is take out a piece of paper, and then you can rewatch this, I'm sure, for every one of the 5 points, write down 5 examples in your own life, how you observe yourself right now, and how you can adapt to be a better version of yourself. And this can be done you can do this in 25 minutes. There's no excuse why anybody could not do this. From a jobless person to the CEO of a large company, nobody has an excuse to build an essential skill in 25 minutes, start building the skill in 25 minutes. There's no excuse. You can even do it in a taxi or on a train or on a plane or wherever. Yeah. Write down 5 questions. As I said, self-examination is point 1. It might not be the most interesting or fascinating thing in the world to do, but it's the foundation. 5 points from your own life to make it applicable to you, rather than some abstract universal examples. And then simply observe. Put the paper down, put it somewhere visible where you can see it. You know, it might be private, so maybe put it on your work desk or in a drawer or something, or at home. But then just in the next days and weeks, start observing. Start observing the current you or previous you and the potential future you, and then just see what happens. It's surprising how much can happen if you just observe, and if you do that essential work of writing down what you observe and where you potentially want to go. And you don't have to make any commitments yet of what better thing you need to do or something. Just options, just ideas, right? And it's just an ideation session. It's easy. There's no excuse. So I invite you to do that and see what comes out of it.
Thank you so much for sharing. This is,
You're
I,
welcome.
tru I truly believe, especially in current times, that we all can face the fact that anything what we have been taught, what we have been kind of aware of, is going to change radically month by month, year by year. It's going to happen even faster after this whole development. So kind of being this I'm stuck or I am where I am is basically not a solution for none of us from my point of view. So just really taking the self-responsibility and going through those 5 steps, for example, checking in with yourself on a regular basis and leading by example is crucial. And before we say goodbye, Alex, thank you so much for sharing all the valuable content. I love it all. What was your biggest win within your entrepreneurial journey? You shared at the beginning you were a corporate rebel, so therefore a startup creator. And overall, what was your biggest win? This is the last question what I ask each and every single guest here. What would you say from your point of view was the biggest win within your entrepreneurial journey?
You know, it's interesting, and this is this is an extremely good question. You know, making good questions for programs like this is tough, and I want to acknowledge you for that. So I love the question. I want to say it's hard to pick because I throw myself into things, and even though it's tough sometimes, I feel because I do that, a lot of these moments come out of it. A lot of these progress moments come out of it. I've set myself a goal of developing amazing leadership transformation experiences, right? And there's a bunch of ways that I do that. And for me, it was fascinating to see what a huge need this is. It's a massive need in this world, right? So even though we are aware that all of us are aware that, you know, we need to invest in the future of water, you know, world hunger, diseases, energy. There's a lot of crises going on that we are solving and that people can invest time in solving and invest their life or lives into solving. And I noticed that that was my mission. My mission is to develop these transformation experiences to build up better leaders. And as a result, to have a higher lever, right? Because if you can transform a leader into a better leader, that leader again will influence hundreds, thousands of people, right? And that's a massive lever. That's a massive influence on the way we build the future. And when I realized not only the power, but the capability of doing that, and the fact that these transformation stories ended or transformed or turned into success stories, that's why I felt, wow, I'm aligned with the mission and I'm loving the mission and the mission is working and I'm giving my little contribution to, you know, maybe romantically speaking, a little bit, a better world. Yeah, that's just enforced me or enforced my will to go there, invest, you know, the rest of my life even stronger into it. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge honor as well, because it's, again, it's not easy, but it's, you know, none of the missions that people set themselves usually are very easy. So it doesn't have to be. And whether you go to Mars or whether you clean up the ocean or, you know, whatever it is that people put as amazing visions, for me, the resonance, the click of, you could say the ikigai, right? The click of what I'm bringing to the world, what matters in the world, what I'm loving, that's when I got real power and found real drive. So that's one of those moments.
I love it. So it's kind of the ripple effect that gives you the life in doing what you're doing and gives you the fire for your mission. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing all your gifts.
Such an honor. Thank you.
Wait to hear more from you and to see more from you. In fact, tonight. So thank you so much for being here.
You'll be coming to the workshop.
Yes.
Amazing. I'm looking forward.
Me too. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for your precious time and energy. And yes, of course, where can people find you? Where can people connect with you? I will share all this in the comments below and of course in the show notes.
Perfect. I loved it. Thank you for the amazing questions. Thanks for making the time. Thanks for having me here. And I'll see you at the workshop tonight.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was insightful, informative, or inspiring. I would love to hear your number one takeaway. Come on over to winx.today and share it in the comments below. You can also provide any kind of question around remote work solutions, business and leadership growth, as well as holistic HR topics. I look forward to provide an A to your queue. Stay tuned, winner, and don't forget, we can win X today.